Everyone saw the sawdust flying, but no one expected the blood. And if you had told me that an HOA president would one day put my nephew in the back of an ambulance, I never would have believed you. So I recently went through something that shook me to my core. Something that made me realize that the biggest battles don't always happen overseas. They can happen in your own backyard. My name is Mark Hale. To most people, that name doesn't mean much. Just something you scribble on a form, a name on an old driver's license. But on the day the world caved in on my nephew, it meant everything. It meant I was the guy who had to act, the one who had to protect, the one who had to fix what someone else tried to destroy. My sister's little boy, Evan, is 8 years old, a firecracker of energy, the kind of kid who believes in superheroes and builds kingdoms out of cardboard. His dad works out of state, gone for months at a time. So when I left the army and came back home, I moved in to help. My job was simple: be the steady hand, the anchor, the guy who could build what needed building and fix what got broken. That morning we were building, and oh, Evan was the happiest foreman you've ever seen. Our project was more than nails and boards. It was a dream on stilts, a treehouse. Not the kind you buy in a kit and nail together in a few hours. No, this was Fort Kickbutt, his name, not mine. A raised platform between two big oaks that faced the lake, standing proud on 4x4 posts, 5 feet off the ground. The smell of fresh pine filled the air. The sun warmed our backs. Sawdust clung to our shirts like badges of honor. We had a rhythm. Evan would start a screw, tongue poking out in concentration, and I'd drive it home with the drill. He designed a crooked little window himself, and when we put it in, he stood back like an architect admiring his masterpiece. For a while, it felt like peace, like normal, like life was giving us one of those rare, perfect days. But peace never lasts, not in our neighborhood, not with Karen done watching. Karen was the president of our HOA, and if perfection had a police force, she was its general. Every blade of grass in her yard stood straight like soldiers at inspection. Every hedge trimmed to exact symmetry. And every time she walked past our half-built fort, I swear you could see her jaw tighten another notch. To her, Fort Kickbutt wasn't a castle of imagination. It was a violation, an eyesore. She left notes under our welcome mat, handwritten, sharp-angled scrawls that smelled of perfume and power trips. I folded them up neatly and used them to light the grill, because to me they weren't orders, they were just paper. But that day, she didn't bring paper, she brought herself. She marched across the lawn, hands on her hips, power suit gleaming like armor even on a Saturday morning. And she said the words like a sentence: "Final warning, that structure violates 17 covenants." 17, can you imagine? Evan froze, hammer in hand, looking from me to her like he'd just been told Santa wasn't real. "Morning, Karen," I said, my voice calm, steady. 17's impressive. You must have been up all night reading the rule book." Her eyes narrowed. She wasn't joking. "This is your last chance. Take it down within 24 hours, or the association will take action." Evan tugged at my sleeve. "Uncle Mark, is she gonna break our fort?" I put a hand on his shoulder. "Nobody's breaking anything, buddy. She's just full of hot air." But deep down, I wondered. Because Karen's hobby wasn't gardening or volunteering or baking cookies for block parties. Her hobby was control. And control is a dangerous thing in the wrong hands. Evan was inside the fort, wearing his crooked paper crown, making decrees about mandatory ice cream and no bedtime. I was on the ground, measuring a crossbeam when I heard it. That sound, high-pitched, mechanical, hungry. A saw. I froze, tape measure slipping from my fingers. It wasn't mine, it was Evan's, and when I looked up, my blood turned to ice. Karen Dunn stood at the edge of our lawn, a reciprocating saw buzzing in her hands. The blade was already chewing into one of the main support posts of Fort Kickbutt. "Karen, stop," I shouted, the words ripping from my throat. "Evan's inside, stop." But she didn't even flinch. Her face was locked in that same grim mask of determination. Her hands steady, her focus absolute. She wasn't just taking down wood, she was dismantling joy, dismantling a little boy's safe place. The saw screamed, spitting sawdust like sparks, and then came the sound I will never forget. Crack. The sharp, gut-wrenching groan of timber giving way. And then Evan's scream. Not the kind of scream kids give when they scrape a knee, not the playful kind you hear at the playground. This was raw, terrified, a sound that split the air and carved straight into my chest. The fort twisted, shuddered, and collapsed in a heap of shattered boards and broken dreams. For a second the world went silent, just sawdust settling in the sun. Karen stood there, saw dangling from her hand, her chest rising and falling like she had won some kind of battle. I didn't see her. I didn't see anything but the wreckage. "Evan," I roared, tearing at the boards, my hands raw, my mind a blur. I tossed beams aside like they were matchsticks, searching, praying. And then I found him pinned under a heavy plank, his leg bent at an angle that was all wrong. His red shirt ripped, his little face pale with dust and pain. "I'm here, buddy. I've got you. You're okay," I whispered, forcing calm into my voice even as my heart broke. My army training kicked in like muscle memory. Check breathing, keep him still, keep him talking. His small hand reached for mine. "Uncle Mark," his voice cracked. "It hurts." Neighbors poured out of their houses. Paul from next door was already on the phone with 911. Across the street, Mrs. Gwynn stood frozen on her porch, hands to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. And Karen, she just stood there, watching, as if she couldn't decide if she was shocked by what she had done or proud of it. The sirens wailed closer, filling the air with their urgent cry. Red and blue lights painted the street. EMTs ran to Evan, cutting away his pant leg, stabilizing the fracture. A sheriff's deputy stepped out of his cruiser, his name tag catching the light. Tours. His eyes scanned the scene, the broken fort, the crying child, the neighbors pointing, and then they landed on Karen, still clutching the saw. "She did it," Mrs. Gwynn shouted, her voice shaking but strong. "She cut it down while the boy was inside." Deputy Torres moved toward her, his voice calm, controlled but sharp. "Ma'am, put the saw down." Karen blinked, her mouth twisting into a strange smile. "This is HOA property. That structure was illegal. I was within my rights." "Ma'am," Torres repeated, firmer this time, "put the saw down." The saw slipped from her fingers, clattering against the grass. And in that moment I swear I saw the truth flicker across her face, not regret, not guilt, but indignation, as if she still believed she was right. Torres clicked the cuffs around her wrists. "You are under arrest for aggravated assault and child endangerment." The sound of those handcuffs closing, it was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. But even as the ambulance doors slammed shut and carried Evan away, even as Karen Dunn was led to the back of a patrol car, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The next morning, my house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a war room. Evan was in the hospital with my sister, his leg set in a cast. Doctors said it was a clean break, months of healing ahead, but it could have been worse. They used the word lucky. Lucky. Tell that to the boy who woke screaming in the night, dreaming of collapsing wood and buzzing blades. Tell that to his mother who sat by his bed, holding his hand like it was the only thread keeping her sane. Me, I wasn't feeling lucky. I was feeling something colder, something darker. A simmering anger I hadn't felt since my days overseas. The kind you have to channel or it eats you alive. So I channeled it into a mission. Karen Dunn wasn't just going to skate by with excuses. We were going to prove what she did, second by second, frame by frame. We were going to build a case so solid no lawyer could twist it. My first call was to Paul, the neighbor everyone trusts. IT guy, steady, dependable, the kind of man you want in your foxhole or your cul-de-sac. He came over with his laptop under one arm and determination in his eyes. "How, Evan?" he asked, setting up at my kitchen table. "He'll be okay," I said, "but he's scared, keeps waking up, crying about the noise, the feeling of it falling." Paul's jaw tightened. "Then let's make sure justice is louder." He tapped a few keys. "Your doorbell cam's already uploaded. Motion sensor triggered the second she stepped onto your lawn. You'll want to see this." He turned the laptop toward me, and there it was. The grainy footage showed Karen marching across the yard, saw in hand. Evan's little head popped up in the window, clear as day, seconds before she pressed that blade into the post. My stomach clenched. She saw him. There was no way she didn't. We watched the silent horror play out again. The cut, the collapse, my frantic dash. The video stopped just as the EMTs arrived. "That's one angle," Paul said quietly. "Now we need the other." I already had the request in. Deputy Tor's bodycam footage. In our state, those files were accessible when you were part of the case. It took some paperwork, but soon enough I had the secure download. When we synced the two videos side by side, the doorbell feed and Tor's cam, the truth became undeniable. Frame by frame, we saw Karen glance up at the window where Evan was visible, and still she cut. "That's intent," Paul said, voice low. "Yeah," I whispered, "that's felony intent." But video wasn't enough. We needed eyes, a voice to match the footage. That's when I crossed the street to Mrs. Gwynn's house. She was on her porch, watering roses with trembling hands. A widow, 78, sharp as glass and just as clear-eyed. "Mrs. Gwynn," I said gently, "I know this is hard, but will you walk me through what you saw?" She set down her watering can, looked me dead in the eyes. "I'll do better than that, Mark. I'll tell you everything." We sat on her porch swing, and she spoke like a recorder playing back truth. She remembered the color of the saw, the snarl on Karen's face, even what shirt I was wearing that day. "I watched you and Evan building all morning," she said softly. "It was beautiful, the way he looked at you, proud as can be, and when she came across that lawn, I knew she was up to no good. I almost called 911 right then." Her statement matched the video, detail for detail. She became the narrator to our silent film. That night, I stitched it all together, video left, video right, timeline captions ticking across the screen. Cold, clinical, brutal in its clarity. One copy for the DA, one for my lawyer, one for my sister. When she watched it, tears filled her eyes, but they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of fury and of hope. "You're going to get her right, Mark," she whispered. I looked at the frozen frame of Karen's face, captured mid-cut. No remorse, no hesitation, just arrogance. "Yeah," I said, "we are." But even then, a question gnawed at me, a question I couldn't shake. Why? Why risk everything for a kid's fort? Why destroy joy with such ruthless determination? I didn't know it yet, but the answer was buried deep in the HOA's shadows. And when it surfaced, it would change everything. The HOA called it a special community meeting, but everyone knew what it really was: damage control. The story had already leaked to the local news. HOA president arrested after treehouse collapse injures child. Cameras were parked at the end of our street, reporters knocking on doors, neighbors whispering behind curtains. Our quiet cul-de-sac had turned into a headline. They booked the elementary school gym for the meeting. The place smelled of floor wax and tension. Half the neighborhood showed up, clustered in little knots, whispering, waiting. At the front table sat the board, pale, nervous, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Arthur, the HOA vice president, shuffled papers with trembling hands. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "We are here to reaffirm community standards and address recent events." It was hollow, corporate, meaningless. Then he opened the floor to questions, and that's when the dam broke. Neighbors shouted over each other. "What about safety? Are we liable? My property values are tanking." It was chaos, anger, fear, blame, swirling like a storm. And then the back doors slammed open. Karen Dunn walked in. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was under a strict no-contact order, forbidden from attending events where I was present. She was breaking the law right there in front of 100 witnesses. She looked different, disheveled, wild-eyed. Not the polished queen of covenants, more like a cornered animal. She marched to the stage, ripped the microphone from Arthur's hands, and turned on the crowd. "You people have no idea," she shrieked, her voice echoing through the gym. "I am the victim here. I've dedicated years to this community, to maintaining standards, and this is the thanks I get." Her words cracked, but her rage didn't. She jabbed a finger into the air, scanning the room until it landed in my direction. "He is the problem, him and his trashy little shack. He provoked me. He flaunted the rules." My jaw tightened, but I stayed in my seat. Across the room, I noticed someone else standing near the exit. A young man, fists clenched, face twisted with fury. I recognized him instantly from old photos. Her son, Kyle, hot-headed, known for trouble. Deputy Torres was already moving up the aisle, hand on his radio, calm but alert. "Ma'am, you're in violation of a court order. You need to come with me now." But Karen wasn't listening. She was lost in her own storm, screaming about conspiracies, betrayal, enemies hiding in every corner. And then Kyle snapped. "Get your hands off my mom," he bellowed. His voice cracked with rage as he yanked something from his waistband. Time froze. It was a gun. A small revolver, but deadly all the same. The crowd fell silent, screams choked back into terrified gasps. Mothers shielded their children. The overhead lights buzzed like the only sound left in the world. Torres stepped back, his hand now hovering near his weapon but not drawing it. His voice was steel wrapped in calm. "Son, put the gun down." Two deputies near the entrance fanned out, slow, steady, trained. Kyle waved the revolver, pointing it at the ceiling, then at Torres. His voice broke. "You're not taking her, none of you are." Karen was sobbing now, clutching at the microphone, her cries echoing uselessly. The female deputy spoke, her tone warm, measured. "Nobody wants to hurt you, Kyle. Nobody wants to hurt your mom. Just set it down. We can talk." Seconds dragged into eternity. My muscles were coiled tight, ready to move, but this wasn't my fight to lead. This was theirs. Finally, Kyle's shoulders sagged, his arm trembled, and then slowly he lowered the gun to the polished floor. The deputies moved in like lightning. In a blur of practiced motion, they had him cuffed, disarmed, secured. No shots fired. The gym exhaled as one. Karen was cuffed again too, her screams hollow now, her power gone. Mother and son led out together, the silence behind them louder than any siren. The meeting was over, but the war was only escalating. After the gymnasium chaos, everything changed. Karen wasn't just a nuisance anymore. She was dangerous, a menace. And with her son now facing felony charges, the Dunn family was unraveling in front of the entire community. But even with all that, one question gnawed at me. Why? Why risk everything for a kid's tree fort? Why swing a saw with a child inside, then double down with excuses and chaos? It didn't add up. No one fights that hard over HOA bylaws. There had to be something else, something bigger. So I dug. I combed through HOA meeting minutes, budgets, architectural decisions. Piles of paperwork as dry as dust. Nothing but covenants and clauses, tedium dressed up as control. It felt like a dead end. Then the message came. An anonymous email. Just one line. Check the property sale records for 312 Willow Creek Lane and ask Arthur why he's so quiet. Arthur, the HOA vice president. Nervous, timid, always looking like he wanted to melt into the background. And 312 Willow Creek Lane? That was the house right behind mine, a prime lot, a lake view, and it had been on the market for months. I pulled the records from the county clerk's website. The house had sold. 2 days before Karen sawed down our fort. The price? Sky high, a record for the neighborhood, the buyer, an out-of-state development corporation. Interesting, but not a smoking gun. Not yet. That's when I decided to knock on Arthur's door. He opened it like a man seeing a ghost. "Mark," he stammered, voice shaking. "WH, what are you doing here?" "I just have a few questions," I said evenly, "about the house on Willow Creek." His face drained of color. He tried to close the door, but I held it gently, firmly, not forcing, just steady. "I'm not here to cause trouble, Arthur. I just want the truth for my nephew." Something in those words cracked him. His shoulders slumped. He let me in. His house was immaculate. Every picture frame aligned, every cushion perfect. The kind of order that comes from fear, not peace. We sat in silence until he finally whispered. "She bullied us all, the whole board. If you disagreed with her, she made your life a nightmare, denied your requests, fined you for nonsense. She had us all terrified." "What about the house, Arthur?" I pressed. "What's the connection?" He swallowed hard, his hands twisted in his lap, and then like a dam breaking, the words poured out. The buyers, they wanted an unobstructed view of the lake, said they'd only pay the asking price if nothing blocked the sightline. And your fort, his voice faltered, your fort sat right in that line. The oaks and the fort ruined their view. He stood abruptly, went to his desk, and came back with a manila envelope. His hands trembled as he gave it to me. She called it a consultant's fee, he whispered. A kickback, $10,000. She promised the agent she'd resolve the sightline issue personally. I opened the envelope. Inside, printouts, text messages between Karen and the realtor, emails with the buyer's rep. Need to clear the view at 3:10. Structure is unapproved, taking direct action tomorrow morning. The bonus is contingent on a clear line of sight. Tell the buyers to get their checkbook ready. No mention of Evan, no mention of safety, just money, just greed. The pieces slammed into place. Karen hadn't been defending HOA standards. She hadn't been fighting for order or property values. She had been chasing a payday. My nephew's safety, his life, was just collateral damage in her $10,000 deal. I sat there staring at those papers, the rage inside me shifting into something sharper, cleaner. This wasn't just recklessness. This was premeditated, calculated, deliberate. Arthur's voice broke the silence. I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner, I was afraid. I stood, gripping the envelope. You did the right thing now, Arthur, that's what matters. As I stepped into the sunlight, the evidence heavy in my hand, I knew the truth. Karen Dunn hadn't just broken rules, she had broken lives for profit. And now I had the proof. The texts in that envelope changed everything. Up until then, Karen's act had looked reckless, maybe even insane. But now, with her greed exposed, it became something else entirely. Deliberate, calculated, a crime for profit. I handed the proof to the district attorney's office. Miss Davies, the prosecutor, flipped through the printouts, her eyes sparking with fire. This, she said, tapping the damning messages, is the ballgame. Charges were amended. Karen was no longer just facing assault and child endangerment. Now prosecutors were weighing financial crime enhancements. The walls were closing in. But walls aren't always solid. Karen still thought she could claw her way out. We filed a claim against her homeowner's insurance, thinking the medical bills, Evan's surgery, therapy, counseling would at least be covered. We had police reports, videos, witnesses. Slam dunk right. Weeks later, a thick envelope arrived. I tore it open expecting relief. Instead, I found a denial stamped in black and white. 2 words, willful act. Insurance, it turns out, doesn't cover crime. They'll pay for accidents. A tree struck by lightning, a burst pipe, a guest slipping on wet steps. But not for intentional destruction. Not for walking across a lawn with a buzzing saw and cutting down a fort with a child inside. Karen Dunn had cut her own safety net. And with insurance gone, the financial weight landed squarely on her shoulders. Medical bills, lawsuits, lawyers, it was all hers now. Desperation began to seep from her like smoke. We heard rumors first, late-night phone calls to board members, angry voicemails full of threats and paranoia. She was cornered, and a cornered enemy is the most dangerous kind. I made sure my sister and Evan were never home alone. Paul kept his cameras rolling 24/7. We braced ourselves because I knew Karen wouldn't just sit quietly and wait for justice. Her next move proved me right. The target wasn't me. It wasn't my sister. It was the one person who could destroy her defense completely, our star witness, Mrs. Gwynn. The attempt was sloppy, but terrifying all the same. Every Tuesday morning, like clockwork, Mrs. Gwynn went grocery shopping at the same local market. She was predictable, kind-hearted, and easy target. That morning, as she loaded oranges into her trunk, a hulking young man in a hoodie walked up. Karen's nephew. Same swagger as her son, same angry eyes. The family thug. He leaned too close, invading her space. His finger stabbed the air inches from her face. She shrank back, her body screaming fear. "You better be careful, old lady," he sneered. "Old folks have accidents. Maybe your memory ain't as good as you think. Would be a shame if something happened before you corrected your story." It was intimidation, plain and vile. But luck, real luck, was on our side that day. Paul was there. Same market, same morning, parked just 2 rows over. He hadn't even left his car yet, still finishing a phone call. And Paul, methodical as ever, had his dual dash cam running. Forward, interior, wide angle, everything. A silent, digital witness. The footage was chilling. The audio faint but clear enough. The video undeniable. You could see her fear, his aggression. And you could hear the threat, forget what you saw, accidents happen. Paul didn't intervene, he didn't need to. The camera was doing the work. He waited until the nephew stalked off, then hurried to help her with her bags, steadying her trembling hands. When he showed me the video later, my blood boiled, but I didn't storm across the street. I didn't let rage run me. I called Tor's, direct line. Within 10 minutes, he called me back. His voice was cold steel. I've seen enough. That's witness intimidation, and if Karen sent him, that makes it conspiracy. The next day in court, Miss Davies played the dash cam video for the judge. The room went silent as the threats echoed across the speakers. When it ended, the judge didn't hesitate. "Miss Dunn," she said, her voice like iron, "bail is revoked. You will remain in custody until trial." 2 deputies cuffed Karen on the spot. Her face, pure shock. Like she'd finally realized she wasn't untouchable. Like the empire she built on fear and arrogance had crumbled under the weight of her own choices. And for the first time, Karen Dunn was exactly where she belonged. Behind bars. Karen Dunn went from queen of the cul-de-sac to inmate number 51,427. But the fight wasn't finished. Criminal court would punish her. Civil court would make her pay. And for Evan, for his broken leg, his sleepless nights, the trauma etched into an 8-year-old's heart, that second fight mattered most. Our lawyer, Ben Carter, was calm and meticulous. "We don't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt," he reminded us. "We just need to show she's more likely than not responsible, and with our evidence, that bar is low." The trial felt smaller than the criminal hearings, just a modern courtroom, 12 jurors, 1 judge, but the stakes were immense. Karen was brought in wearing a plain gray suit instead of orange, but her eyes gave her away. Hollow, tired, a woman stripped of power. Ben started with the basics. HOA bylaws. He showed that Karen had no authority to act as she did. Violations were supposed to mean warnings, fines, and if necessary, legal action. Nowhere did it say the president could take a saw to someone's property. He was building the foundation. She hadn't just broken morality, she had broken her own rules. Then came the video. On the big screen, the doorbell camera rolled. Karen marching across the lawn, Evan's little head in the window, the blade biting into wood, the collapse. The jurors flinched as the fort came down, as Evan's scream cut the silence. Then the body cam, her excuses recorded forever, illegal structure, my rights. Her words sounded smaller here, pathetic against the evidence. And then came the voice of truth, Mrs. Gwynn. Calm, grandmotherly, clear, she described every moment she saw, her testimony fitting the footage like puzzle pieces locking into place. But the most powerful moment didn't come from an adult at all. It came from Evan. The court had ruled it too traumatic for him to testify in person, so weeks earlier we'd recorded a deposition. They dimmed the lights. The video began. Evan sat in a chair, his bright red cast propped up, a toy-hard hat resting on the table beside him. His voice was soft but steady. "Can you tell us your name?" Ben asked. "Evan," he said, "I'm 8. He smiled when asked about the fort. "Me and Uncle Mark built it, Fort Kickbutt, best fort ever." But when Ben asked what happened, that smile faded. He looked down, fingers tracing his cast. "The shaky lady came," he whispered, the name he used now for Karen. "She had a loud buzzing thing. She cut the fort's leg. It fell on me. It hurt. A lot." The video ended, and there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. Karen's lawyer tried to spin excuses. Stress, neighborhood safety, even tried to paint me as negligent for letting Evan help build. But the jury wasn't buying it, not after the videos, not after Evan. Closing arguments sealed it. Ben's voice rang steady. This was not an accident. This was a choice. A selfish act made for money at the expense of a child's safety. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is your choice to hold her accountable. The jury left. Less than an hour later, they returned. The foreman stood, calloused hands gripping the verdict sheet. We find in favor of the plaintiff. My sister gasped. Relief surged through me like a tide, but the foreman wasn't done. For medical expenses, past and future, $150,000. For pain and suffering, $500,000. And for punitive damages to punish the defendant for her malicious conduct, $1 million. The numbers echoed in the room. Karen slumped in her chair, her face ashen. She had lost everything: her title, her freedom, her money, her reputation. The fort had fallen, but justice had stood tall. The day after the verdict, the air felt lighter. For the first time in months, our street wasn't weighed down by fear or tension. But in our yard, the flattened patch of grass where Fort Kickbutt had once stood still looked like a scar. I promised Evan we'd rebuild it, stronger than before. I thought it would just be the two of us again, hammer and drill in hand. But I was wrong. That Saturday morning, I stepped outside with a toolbox, and Paul was already walking over, circular saw slung under his arm. "Figured you could use an extra hand," he said with a quiet smile. Then Buddy Bruno showed up, loud as ever, pushing a wheelbarrow full of concrete mix. "You're not setting those posts in dirt this time, are you? Foundation first, Mark. Got to do it right." And then more came. One neighbor after another, carrying lumber, tools, snacks. Mrs. Gwynn arrived with lemonade and cookies, declaring herself the foreman of morale. Even the younger families brought their kids, eager to help carry planks and sweep sawdust. It wasn't just a project anymore. It was a statement. A community rising together to replace something torn down with something stronger. We dug deep holes and set posts in concrete. Paul measured cuts with engineer precision, while I bolted beams into place with the same steadiness I used in the service. Everyone found their role. Everyone mattered. By noon, laughter echoed through the cul-de-sac. Sawdust and sweat mixed with bad jokes and good stories. For once, Karen Dunn wasn't the headline of our street. Hope was. And then a familiar cruiser pulled up. Deputy Torres stepped out, off-duty in jeans and a polo, carrying a small box. Beside him, a K9 handler led a German shepherd bound onto the lawn, chasing kids, tennis balls like it was born for joy. Torres handed me the box. "The guys at the station took up a collection," he said. Inside were heavy-duty galvanized carriage bolts, the best kind. "We see a lot of bad out there. Nice to be part of something good for once." I shook his hand. Words failed me, but gratitude didn't. By late afternoon, the new fort stood tall. Bigger, stronger, red paint gleaming on the roof beam that Evan had signed himself. Even with his cast, he climbed the rope ladder, determination etched on his little face. When he reached the top, he stood on the deck like a king surveying his kingdom, beaming down at the crowd of neighbors who had built it for him. "Thank you," he shouted, voice full of 8-year-old joy. Cheers erupted, applause, smiles. The fort wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was resilience carved into lumber, a monument to standing together when someone tries to tear you down. Months passed. Evan healed the scar on his leg, fatting as quickly as the nightmares. The neighborhood settled into peace. Arthur became HOA president, fair, boring, steady, exactly what we needed. Karen Dunn's house went up for sale, the foreclosure signs swinging in the wind. A young family moved in, their kids racing bikes with Evan under the same oaks that had once held a fort of broken boards. Karen, she pled guilty, took her prison sentence. Her son got probation, her nephew a misdemeanor. Their empire of intimidation collapsed into nothing more than records in a courthouse file. Life went on, school bells, dinners, laughter. And then one evening in the hardware store I saw her. Jeans, jacket, gray at the temples, just another tired face in a fluorescent aisle. She glanced at me across bins of bolts. No words, just a nod. I nodded back. That was all, no rage, no speeches, just quiet, because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the silence that stays. At home, Evan sat in the fort's window, comic book in hand. legs swinging, the red plank above him glowing in the sunset. How far will a man go to defend his own? All the way he has to. You stand firm, you gather proof, you protect your people. And then when the storm passes, you build again, stronger than before. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.